I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on the Spotlight Network, we're diving into a deeply personal and thought-provoking book. It's called My Redemption from Pluto. It's written by a terrific author by the name of Larry V. Dykstra. In the book, he blends compelling life stories and emotional as well as spiritual insight. The book explores the power of relationships with ourselves, others, the world, and the divine. Through 32 life lessons, the author shares wisdom learned from corporate boardrooms, music rooms, and hospital wings, offering readers a roadmap to deeper meaning and a mindful life. We're delighted to have this very talented author join us once again here today on Spotlight, and we ask viewers like you to support authors like him by subscribing to our channel and by purchasing his amazing book. The links are below this interview. And be sure to download the Spotlight Network TV app, streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Amazon Fire TV. Larry, welcome back to Spotlight. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, Logan.
It's an honor to have you on the show. The name of the book, of course, is so intriguing, My Redemption from Pluto. Everybody at home who's watching has to be asking, what the heck does that mean? So I'll ask you, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah, there are a couple clues in the title, but as background, I had a very successful business career. But at the last year or so, I was starting to feel like I wasn't valued as much as I thought I should be. And it was around the same time that Pluto was going through its own kind of loss of status. And so I think it tainted my attitude. So that's the Pluto part. The redemption part is I realized a couple years after I retired that I had been given an assignment the last year that I had failed to take an opportunity or take full advantage of, and that was to help train some of the newer folks in my department. And I had a reminder of that a couple years later, and so I gave some thought and I said, well, if I share some things I've learned in life, maybe that'll make up for my missed opportunity when I had it at work. So that's really what it's about. I'm trying to redeem myself from my falling into the bad company of Pluto, if you will. So
You felt the same way that you felt when Pluto was banned from being a planet. They're like, it's not really a planet, it might be a
yeah,
dwarf planet. You know, growing up, that was always my favorite planet. It was the
yeah.
farthest planet. It was named Pluto, which was a Disney character. You know, it had a lot of appeal to young people. So I was disillusioned with life as well at that time. You had quite a storied corporate career. Tell the folks at home a little bit more about it. You worked with some of the top brands and companies in the world.
hmm I was lucky. I actually started, I had a degree and master's degree in political science, and then some postgraduate work, which turned out, without me realizing, was perfect training for marketing research. We were using survey research and just some of the concepts like party loyalty, brand loyalty, how attitudes impact behavior, whether that's purchase behavior or voting behavior. And I was lucky enough to get an entry level job at Quaker Oats in Chicago, where I lived at the time and near where I grew up. And was also fortunate after a year there. First of all, Quaker was a wonderful place. It was very genteel. They cared about people. They cared about giving them the training they needed. And I was fortunate. I got assigned to this small brand that Quaker had purchased about a year and a half before called Gatorade. And it was only about $100 million when I started working on it. And I worked on it for 9 years and would like to say that through my work and with the partnership with the marketing folks, we figured out what the brand was about. We figured out who we were really competing with. And it's now a worldwide brand. And so a great success story. And I learned a lot there. I took a job with Pizza Hut then. And that is how I got to Dallas, by the way, through I took a job with Wichita where the headquarters was. And 6 months later, to my surprise, we got moved here, but it's been a great thing. But the way I would describe it in Pizza Hut and most restaurant businesses, there's the finance people that want to charge more for the product or take costs out. The marketing people want to make up things. The operations people want to make it easier to make. So I would be in the senior meetings representing what was called the voice of the customer. And that would be saying, okay, you've got some internal pressures and desires here, but you also need to take into account what's going on outside our building in terms of consumer preferences and trends. And so that was really my role for 14 years there. And it was a wonderful, wonderful place. Met some great people in both of those places.
Two icons. I mean, Gatorade and Pizza Hut. I mean, Gatorade was a phenom, and it still is. I mean, kind of in a niche all by itself.
Mhm.
I mean, we think of sports drink, you think of Gatorade and nothing else. Maybe if I strain my brain, I can come up with Powerade, but it's certainly not what I would come up with right away, and certainly not what you see most people drinking on the sidelines. But after working decades for these top companies, being a titan of business, if you will, uh, you feel like there's more of you to give and there's lessons to be learned. And some of those lessons, I guess, you learned at places like Quaker Oats and Quaker and Gatorade and Pizza Hut. Tell us what you learned and how you apply it to your writing.
Um, Let me start by saying one of the things, the lessons learned, the last presentation I made in my business career at Pizza Hut was a presentation to the marketing department called 25 Things I've Learned in 25 Years of Business. And by happenstance, a couple of years later, I had a reunion of many of my former peers, and I talk about that in the introduction to the book, but I got to see some people, and a couple of them mentioned, "Hey, that presentation you made, that was really kind of helpful, and I use it in training my people." And so I pulled it out and looked at it, and it was really just a list. If I read you the list, you would go, "Oh, okay, that seems obvious. I would know that. I need to kind of do that." But since I had been starting to do some writing, I started to think about I could imagine there was an inciting incident that led to me learning that, and I could write it in an engaging fashion, and then people would maybe internalize it for themselves. So the 25 became 32. Some of the 25 disappeared, but that is really where it came from, was trying to bring energy and excitement and just a whole entertainment of narrative writing into sharing lessons learned. So,
Interesting that that was the genesis of the book, your 25 things that you learned over 25 years. Let's go through some of those. What would you say the biggest lesson is or was?
oh, that's a real hard question because I like so many of them. I'm going to go with, and it would probably change tomorrow, I think, if you ask me tomorrow. Uh, One that strikes me as important, and that's called "Exploring New Worlds." I think is the name of the chapter, or that was the takeaway. And it kind of fits with the advice I've given a lot of people when they retire. If you're an actor, you're going to be asked to do acting roles. If you're a marketer, you're probably going to be asked to do, help out nonprofit marketing. And that's okay, but I think retirement is an opportunity to try new things and see how they feel for you and see how others react to you in those roles. And so that chapter is about my movement into working in children's hospitals and specifically playing the role of chaplain for 9 months at a children's hospital where I had been playing music in individual rooms. And it was probably the most challenging thing I've done. It was probably, I learned more about life, about people, about how I could help others in very difficult times and be a non-anxious presence. Learned about the importance of hospitality in those settings, which doesn't seem like a big deal. And learned how to pray with others and just be a presence with them as they sorted through some of their challenges. And so it was difficult at the time, but I think I came out stronger. And in that chapter, I use a metaphor which I stumbled upon, or it's actually an example of Biosphere 2. When it was built, it was supposed to be a sustainable kind of environment like the Earth, and the trees there grew quickly, but they started to fall apart because there was no wind to toughen them and build up the cellular structure of the limbs. And so we need those winds, we need those experiences to that kind of make us stronger and different in a whole new way. And so it's something I think is a broader lesson that try new things and see how they feel, because life is about trying new things, I think so.
Exactly. Stay in your lane can be a good advice when you're building your career, but once your career is built, I think it is good to get out of your lane
Yeah.
and try different things. Like you said, we get pigeonholed so easily. People can't see through that. Larry's a marketing guy, Logan's a broadcaster, and that's it. And those are our strengths. I can understand why people would want to utilize them. But being a chaplain at a children's hospital, had to be such a profound experience. I mean, being around sick kids, dying kids, sometimes with them in their last moments, had to be, heartbreaking, if you as an empathetic person, just heartbreaking at times, seeing their parents,
Yeah.
seeing them, wondering why the hell they're going through this. What was that like?
It was challenging. There were quite honestly, and I don't write about it here. I wrote about it in another book called Musical Hugs, where I go through it was the first thing I wrote, and it was a journey, shares my journey from corporate career to playing music in children's hospitals, and then thinking I could do more, and then went to the same children's hospital in the chaplain role. And one of the biggest challenges was when they gave us our badges. And by the way, it's called clinical pastoral education, and a lot of people don't know about it, but most pastors need to go through that in seminary. And so I did an extended unit with about 9 other colleagues. And when we got our badges, it said chaplain, and another colleague in mine, we protested, say, "Where's the intern part?" And they said, "Nope, you're a chaplain."
Right.
And I had a supervisor who loved to use metaphors, and he said, "It's like the line in The Wizard of Oz. You're a chaplain. You're just on the journey to find the chaplain already inside of you." And
Yeah.
we didn't accept that, but I think I did find that was the case. There were some, but you learn, I think, the role of hospitality, helping people find rooms, bringing them water, just finding their way around a hospital can be a real blessing to people who are going through things. And there were some difficult moments, and one difficult night in particular, but I made it through, and I think I was there but you just have to just be there, because there are really no words that can help a parent through a situation that they're going through.
Yeah, you can't say, I understand how you're feeling. There's nothing you can
No,
say, just to be there with them. The presence, I think, is sometimes helpful. Prayer is very, very helpful if you want to pray together.
yeah,
And would you do that? Would you pray with the people at times?
yeah, and yeah, I probably prayed more out loud in the hospital than I had in my entire life before, and I shouldn't call this a trick, but what you learn is it's I'm not going to pray about what's on my mind. You ask the parent or child, whoever you're with, saying, "Well, what would you like me to pray for?" And then you kind of become an intercessor between them and God, to try and
Yeah.
express what's on their mind and in their hearts. And so it's yeah, I did that quite a bit. And
Yeah. Yeah, that's a tough one. That's really, you talk about going from marketing for Pizza Hut to being with dying children. It's a 180-degree turn, but it's opening up a part of your soul and exposing you to parts of life that you might not have seen otherwise. And they're there, and they're reminders of the fragility of life as well.
mhm.
So spreading your wings and trying different things is one of the keys of your book. Let's talk about some of the other. What are some of the other 32 points that you think are of interest? And all of them are, of course, but topping the list.
Well, there's one about in the 25 things presentation, I had a couple lines that said, hang out with kids, because at the time, my last 4 or 5 years, we had an on-site daycare center at Pizza Hut, and I would play for 4-year-olds, play guitar and sing for them. And it was a very enriching experience. So I was trying to um, fill that in, and that's how I started playing music in children's hospitals. But I love hanging out with kids. And so the inciting incident for this one is my wife and I were in the Netherlands, and we both grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church, and we thought we saw a church in Utrecht across the canal or the river, and we said, let's go there. And the locals treated us great. They welcomed us in English, but we were sitting in the service, and it was all in Dutch, and I don't speak Dutch, and since I'm of Dutch descent, I can say this. We can be a fairly stoic bunch at times, and so I was going, oh, this is just going to be miserable. Everybody's so sad and not happy, and it's in another language. And then after an announcement, about 10 kids about age 6 or so jumped up and started skipping and hopping and laughing their way out of the sanctuary to probably some child activity. And I was sitting there just going, when do we lose, and how do we lose that exuberance? And so I started taking my own advice and started to do more work with children in our church and summer camps, and just observe them. And I think they have this sense of wonder that we lose, and they notice so much. And as long as you keep them safe, let them take the lead, is kind of what I concluded. And I would say, if you don't believe me, just go to a park or go to a mall and watch the kids and watch their parents. And the kids might stop and want to look at something and touch it, and the parents will probably say, no, we got to get going. And so it's let the kids lead, and I think they'll help you regain that sense of wonder. So
I think that's great. Yeah, you'll see kids just dancing, spontaneously in the middle of a shopping mall, or singing or doing something. And I'm with you. I grew up, my mom owned a daycare center and and a summer camp. And working in the summer camp was some of the best years of my life, being around the kids. And I often think now, like, would it be fun to like run a summer camp again? You know? And I think it would be. I don't know if it's just nostalgia, but like I'm on your side. Witnessing children playing, having that sense of awe, that sense of wonder is wonderful, because it reminds you of your own sense of wonder, seeing things through their eyes.
yeah,
I think it's so important.
yeah, that's great. And I used an example there where I was at we had a breakfast to kick off the Sunday school year, I think, and there were 3 children, probably about 3rd, 4th grade, and they were asked to draw something in nature. And so they're working together, and they end up drawing this thing that's purple and white stripes, and it looks like little wheels or balls on the feet. So I said, "What's that?" And one of the children said, "It's a derba." And matter of factly, and I go, "Oh, okay, what's a derba?" And they said, "Well," and then another one said, "Well, it's a zebra that's got wheels, so it'll go really fast in the derby." And I'm going, and then okay,
Yeah.
and that was just made perfect sense for them. And I'm like, I think you just got to ask them, and you'll just get so much back in return.
Exactly. Hence the term, kids say the darndest thing. I think
Yeah,
Art Linkletter
Art
made a
Linkletter, yes,
career out of that, right? Without a
yeah.
doubt. So that's two. Let's talk about one more of your 32 tips.
This one came late. As I said, I from a Dutch background, and I took business really seriously. And I had an assistant that would say, "You need to lighten up, Larry," and I'd go, "Yeah, okay." Um, um, but and so she made progress. But I had a situation where at our church we were doing it's a one play act called Amal and the Night Visitors, and it's about the 3 magi are going to see the baby Jesus, and they stop at a mall in his mother's house on the way, and stay overnight. And there was a scene in the middle where I was recruited along with my son Evan and another gentleman to dance with three young women. It's about a 4-minute dance scene. And I think I got kind of tricked into doing it. But anyhow, it became fun, but we had to do extra work, and we had a choreographer who was doing us all this, extra work. And I think we finally got it down. At our last rehearsal, she pulled all 6 of us in and said, here's the secret to success. And I'm thinking, okay, this is what I really need to hear, how to do this right. She says, just smile. And I went, what? And she says, just smile, because if you look like you're having fun, then the audience will have fun too. And if you go see performances now, if you go see whoever it is on stage, if they don't look like they're having fun, I'm not going to have as much fun either. So It became something I adopted. And I try and smile more. I smile at people in the grocery store, smile in the TSA line. It's amazing the responses you'll get, because smiling is contagious. And so I keep trying to remind myself that smile. One piece of research, I'm a researcher by training and also by orientation. So often when I'd have this lesson, I would go look for something like the biosphere example to certify or kind of clarify that I'm actually onto something. But there was a study done, I forget where, but they took the baseball cards, the 1952 baseball cards, and looked at the pictures, and those that were smiling on the average lived 7 years longer than those that weren't. Now, that could have something to do with nothing, but I thought, smiling makes you feel better. So I try and remind myself every day. And even during this interview, I got smiley faces here, so I can remind myself to smile.
Exactly. No, the power of a smile is great. It makes you feel good first and foremost. Makes people around you feel relaxed. I mean, walk into a store, smile at the clerk and say, hey, how are you today? And it makes all the difference in the world. They'll just start talking to you like you're an old friend. It really makes your life a lot better, and the people's lives that you interact with a lot better. Let's talk a little bit about the 4 types of relationships that your book focuses on. Tell us more about that.
That came, I learned about that. It was called Relational Consciousness is the concept. And comes out of a book written by, I can't remember their backgrounds, but it was like must reading for anyone working in a children's hospital. And they did interviews. It's Hay and Nye are their last names. I can't recall the first, but it was based on in-depth interviews with children. And they concluded that children, I think it was called The Spirit of the Child. It was the name of the book. But they concluded that children have an innate spirituality and innate connection, and it gets expressed in terms of their relationship with themselves, with others, with the world around them, and with God. They use different language than I used. But as I was working on the book and the chapters were growing, you've mentioned there are 32 chapters, but they come from different types of experiences. Some happen in business, some at church, some in vacation, some in the hospital. And so I was looking for some way to organize this, and I started to play or work with that relational consciousness framework, and it seemed to work. Now, some chapters might fit better in other places. We could argue that, but it worked for me. And I think it's a kind of a 360-degree way of connecting yourself with life, because you do have to understand and kind of consider, how am I growing as an individual? How am I interacting with others? What am I gaining from the world, or what am I doing for the world? And then what's my connection with something bigger out there, whether you call it God or the divine? And so it helps me kind of feel like I'm a more complete person. And it was, as I said, a way to conveniently organize this.
It's a good organization, and it does kind of give you your place in the universe that we all kind of share, So I
Yeah.
think that is important. Talk to us a little bit about managing your mindset and what you mean in the context of this book.
Yeah, that was one of the chapters, and that one happened on vacation. Specifically, I walked the Camino de Santiago with my wife in 2012. I think if people don't know, or viewers don't know, it's a pilgrimage route that started in the Middle Ages, and it goes from places all around Europe to Santiago de Compostela, which is in northwestern Spain. So I walked 29 days and about 450 miles. But there was one day on this one section where it was hot and I was tired, and I my water was warm, and I threw down my walking stick and told my wife, "Go on without me," and she was quite happy to do that. And I sat down under this tree and I went, that didn't accomplish a whole lot. I still have to walk this. And at the time I was reading, and this is, if I'm going to give a reading recommendation, Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He was imprisoned during World War II. He was a Jewish psychologist. He lost his entire family, but he really noticed which of the prisoners he was with were able to best survive the situation or the challenge they were in the concentration camps. And to me, the basic conclusion he had was, they can take everything away from you, but you can still manage and control your own mindset, how you approach the problem and how you think about it. And so at the toughest of times, you still have that available to you. So the Camino walk was a trivial example of that, a little temper tantrum, but that was the moment where I said, wow, yeah, I mean, I've got to deal with this, and I can.
Yeah, mindset is so important. If you are a happy person intrinsically, I think you could put them in a prison cell and they'll find a reason to be happy. I think if you're an unhappy person and that's your mindset, put them on a, beautiful tropical island, they'll find a reason not to be happy. So mindset is very, very powerful. Talk to us a little bit about your writing career now. Are you writing anything new? What's your life like? Still working with children? What's your life like now?
My life now. I still go to the children's hospitals a couple days a month. I'm exploring volunteering in the pastoral care office there. So it'd be a different kind of role than the chaplain role, because I'd involved a lot more serious things like overnights there. Um, you asked about books. I wrote, published my father's memoir from World War II. It's called In the Service of My Country. And in short, I really wanted to get in his hands, and I was able to get it into his hands at age 93. And that those who fought in World War II and that greatest generation, I think they came back and didn't really, for the most part, most didn't talk about what they had gone through, and their silence was part of their um, uh, work as a soldier. And then he started talking about things, and when he retired in 1986 or 88, and that led him to start looking for crew members and other things and writing letters to the editor. And so he passed away about 5 years ago, but 3 years before he died, I was able to get it to him. But while I published it, it was a wonderful experience because I would have this information, it wasn't adding up. So I'd call him about once a week and I'd say, can you explain this? And he'd explain that. And he would say, well, have I told you this other story? And then he'd tell another story I'd never heard of. And my wife, Sandy's saying, you got to stop accepting these stories because you're never going to get this book done. And so he finally told me a story one day that I knew could seal it. And it was really about the odds. He flew 50 missions and was able to get home from southern Italy into B-24 bombers. And he knew that the odds of being able to survive that were very rare. And then he told me another story about unusual odds. And so So that was an honor. The thing I'm working on now, uh, and I probably shouldn't even talk about this, but who knows where it go. I joined a senior softball team 4 years ago. And I was a pretty good athlete as a child, and but hadn't played softball in about 40 years. And it's a local league of senior citizens, and I got assigned a team that I didn't know anything about. And once I played the first game, I found out that they had lost 88 in a row. So
Bad
I
News
had,
Bears.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, we call them the bad knees bears, but or one of my, but and then I've played now in my fourth year, and I think of the games I've played in, we've won two and lost about 90 or so. So this start, and I've seen some amazing things. It takes I don't know should call it skill. I'm being ironic here. It's amazing how we are able to lose games. And so it started, I think, as a book about sharing some of these crazy plays and moves, and me learning to deal with my competitive nature. I think it's evolving into, I started to ask my teammates and others why they play. And I think it's more about, late in life when there's a lot of, I call it the unraveling. When you get to be 70 or so like me, there's a lot of little things start to go away, and they just love the fact that they can play the game yet. And I'm just kind of learning that lesson from them. So this
Oh,
is a work in
you're a
progress.
young 70, that's for sure, because I didn't guess that. I thought you were at least a decade or so younger.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. It's funny as you talk and I listen to what you say, it seems like a lot of the secrets that you have to share is to remember who you were as a young person. And that's the key to being happier as an older person. I mean, if you look at it, be around children, don't, spread your wings and do whatever you want. I mean, that's typical child. Children aren't staying in their lane and doing what they're supposed to do. And then even like playing softball again. I mean, those are like, when you're talking about playing softball, like, yeah, I haven't played softball since I was working with that summer camp,
Hmm.
50 some odd years ago. And they were happy. We lost every game too, but they were happy times and going to McDonald's afterwards and all that stuff when it still had arches. And yeah, so amazing, amazing. Well, you've got some great advice, a great perspective on life. A lot of it's contained within this book. It is called My Redemption from Pluto, an introspective and uplifting read that reminds us that connection, reflection, and compassion can guide us back to purpose. And of course, rediscovering your roots as a child as well. Larry, thank you so much for joining me here today on Spotlight.
Well, thank you, Logan. I enjoyed it immensely. Thank you.
Same here. Enjoyed our talk tremendously. To the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.